We speak about queer identities, we speak about caste identities, religion, disability. And I hope that this conversation sparks that question that we are all looking for and how to solve it, how to resolve it, at least how to attempt to do that.
My hope for this conversation is to see that how whatever we are doing in our own respective fields, if there is a space for convergence there, to see that how can we move that discourse further, to see that okay, if law and technology both impact marginalized, vulnerable communities, what exactly can be done so that we can make even things, even if we tip the point of discourse to a little bit of bettering the discourse. That's the only agenda which I have created.
Institution structure that is already there. There is a possibility of invisibility of the data for queer community, marginalized community. So I feel that is a conversation that needs to come forth, because what we realized with Safe City and the work that we do with collecting anonymous data on sexual and gender-based violence, incidences that happen on ground. I'll tell you an example of how we realized, and this is important because then we really did understand privacy from two perspectives. One, how we would like to identify you or how we know you, and how you would like to identify yourself also. So in the form, it's a quantitative form where we have, in the initial questions, there is, what is your age? And this is anonymous, which means that no personally identifiable information will be taken in. But we do need gender, we do need age group to look at the trends of crime happening there. Now, with respect to privacy there, the initial questions were, what's your age and what's your gender? And we realized that 80% of the users are women for the application. 18% somewhere are men, and then there is a 2% of non-binary community. Now, when you move ahead in the questionnaire, you realize that there is a question of what happened to you, would you like to describe it? And then follows through is, what do you think was the reason for the incident happening to you, the attack happening to you? And there we realized a lot of queer community wants to identify their identity and say, see, this happened to me because of my gender or my caste or my disability. And that's when I realized that if we don't give them opportunity to express why do we need this data, or how much of this data will be used or where it will be stored, I don't think people would come out and be a part of the system. And that's the issue, right? There is a set structure, but they just didn't want to identify themselves in the initial bit. But the minute we give you the reason we need to understand what was the reason of attack, they would like to identify themselves. So I feel like there requires trust very importantly. Nobody's going to come and tell you about their life, and that's why privacy is very different in private space and in public spaces. That I think the government really needs to take into consideration with the laws that are coming out, especially with digital platforms and the series of judgments and the notifications and the Gazette rules, etc. that are coming out. So that's how I look at privacy and how we understand it from the work that we're doing on ground. But over to you for more legalities.
Either you tell us now and bear yourself out right now, or you don't say anything.
Yeah.
Like hold your breath forever.
Yeah.
Hold your peace forever, which is something which is very interesting because my work is in the area of discrimination law, and discrimination law not just with regards to identity of gender but also disability or caste. Now, when one is getting hired for that matter, one might not really be comfortable if they don't happen to have a benchmark disability, so to speak, right? They might not really be very comfortable out like telling their manager or the hirer that, look, I have this kind of invisible disability. But over time, once they have showed their manager that, oh, they're a good performer, they are a functional performer, they deliver on time, they have proved their mettle, they might be comfortable sharing aspects of their identity, right? Be it disabled identity, be it queer identity, which makes us, like as law people, we think that, okay, once we are given a framework and like a structure, you either put yourself in this slot or that slot to make yourself legible, right? But we don't really bear ourselves to, in general life, there is always boundary management that we keep doing. Like we keep on, we once we are comfortable with people, we tell them other things. So the thing that you were saying, right? Like once you kind of started looking into the qualitative data, you found out that why violence is happening on individuals. So that's the thing, like we have to understand that while yes, structures are needed, but structures can't be as rigid that kind of prevent people from actually existing.
Just as you said, in systems and people in workplaces, and then sort of reveal those parts of yourself. And I think one person we spoke to was not just closeted, but also sort of very conservative family space. So they had a constant fear of one family surveillance which was happening. So even if they like a post that is pro queer rights or something, they would hear about it later, and that made them really fearful that they will be outed and that there will be like non-physical consequences and there will be like threats to safety. And in that context, they had this really big desire to explore their identity, but they continue to present as their gender assigned at birth, etc. While the internet has sort of become this space where they can do some of that. But at the same time, they're so scared that the surveillance will continue. They've gotten, and this is where I was talking about the resistance, they've gotten a separate SIM, a separate phone, and they made like a different profile where they have their chosen name and they don't put their photos. And they sort of engage with those platforms in that manner where they are able to now put their poetry, make community, etc. But it's like this very delicate situation where they're sort of engaging with that. So yeah, so I think the temporality of sort of when you choose to disclose, when you are able to build trust, I think I just wanted to highlight that I also sort of agree. And a lot, they were in fact saying that within queer spaces as well, there's not enough spaces for closeted people to sort of convene and stuff like that. But those are, I feel like, realities of the Indian context where safety and sort of identity have to be negotiated constantly. So in that context, I think privacy and anonymity is really integral to if you do imagine a queer internet, it would mean that those things are there.
But that just adds to the, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's just that, it's just there to say that if you do reveal yourself, there are going to be consequences, which means the government is asking you to reveal it.
Yeah.
But there's no protection.
Yeah.
Where's the protection? So I think it has to go sandwiched hand in hand. That
Exactly.
if you do want to reveal yourself, you do it with your time and space. But when you do, we're here to protect you.
Yeah.
That should club together.
Exactly. I think most queer trans people are negotiating with systems in that way. That okay, these are the categories, these are the legal categories available to me. Now, which one do I think right now works for this thing? What does my ID say? Interestingly, GPay came up as one of the spaces where somebody got outed and then had to be ostracized out of their college, etc. So basically, they made a payment and their bank account name is different from their chosen name, and they go by the chosen name in their college. So they immediately sort of blocked them and sort of had a conversation with them, and they were just like, I didn't even realize. But those are also considerations that people are making.
I feel for somebody who has built on an identity from scratch, which is their own, it becomes difficult when they're outed to manage it. And there is a lot of mental health issues around it also, which I have seen a lot of token conversations on. Please take care of yourself. And what do they say? Put moisturizer, etc. It's the Pride Month conversations that happen. Put moisturizer, take a nice bath,
Okay,
better.
Self-care talks.
Self-care talks. But when the self is in crisis,
Yes.
how do you move ahead with self-care? So, and I don't think there are, like I said, there are no measures, and there are only few spaces where you can find that protection, you can find that recourse that I can be taken care of. So I feel like violation happens on many ends. I can bring an example of not outed, but the idea that I'm just thinking it's a government example. So I'm not going to name names, but there is a corporation, municipal corporation that had a program where they involved transgender community in employment in their office. Now this is government office employment, and the officer who was taken in charge of this was very proud of the fact that she's done this good work, and so we've gone to meet her, and you can see the damage because the structure is not existing. She invited the transgender community people to be employed in this workplace. And I asked her, how did you do it? How did you manage to integrate the two together? And she said, first things first, I told all of my employees that this is going to happen. There is no way out of it, which is amazing. So there is no negotiation. There is nobody's complaining. Nobody's asking why. And then she said that to the transgender community, I told them to, now that you're a part of an office, please do tone down. Which is such a pathetic thing to say. And thinking of it from that perspective, how then do you expect somebody to come out with safety, even in places that are supposed to be safe, that now here you can come out? How do I come out in a place where you don't have the structure still to understand the culture, understand the background, understand the things that are valued in their life, should be appreciated with dignity, with fairness? So I think that's the issue with most cases that people have been outed. Absolute violation of what I want, what my right is. B, there is no safety. And C, even if they say that there is safety, it is not foolproof, I would say. There's so much work that has to be done, because we need to learn more from the community actually than from what we know about the law and what are the practices.
Which is not only located within the confines of the territorial space of India, and because the apps are also answerable to the other countries of the world which have more laws protecting queer and trans identities, one is kind of mistaken that how the same kind of application works for the territorial jurisdiction of India, right? So the kind of cases that are coming up specifically with respect to spamming like young gay boys on Grindr, and the kind of total lack of protection or total lack of sensitivity that is present in the police when someone can clean. First of all, people don't want to report it because they feel that there is a additional layer of how would I say it? Additional layer of victimization that would come if they even go and report something like this, right? So just because the platform has worked like in a way which is more sensitive for queer and trans people abroad, it does not automatically mean that it would happen so in our country's case as well, considering the fact that with the new BNS in picture, when it was reading down of section 377 of IPC that happened, it meant that non-consensual homosexual activity can be punished under section 377, right? So if a man gets raped by another man, they can still be prosecuted under section 377. That was the only protection one could have had at that point of time. With the BNS, that protection is gone. So which means, under the imagination of the Indian state right now in 2025, men can't be raped. So if you go with, if your law does not even recognize such a harm, such a crime, no matter what Grindr policy is, you won't be again, a young gay man would not be able to prosecute if they feel that they have been harmed like that. So that's how I would kind of answer you, Angela, because while I come from that space where, despite being a lawyer, we feel that there needs to be laws. Yes, sometimes the tendency is that we think that for every problem a law would be a solution. I don't cater to that brand, but at the same time, for some things there is specific need to kind of justify that, okay, this is something that is completely prohibited and it's a crime and it's an offense, and there are it's a punishable harm which would, and if there was something within the IPC 377, even a read down version, what was the need for the government to remove that in the BNS? That's a question.
It just puts the intentions of the government out there if they're not working on it. Then. Even after having intermediaries, even after having community guidelines, it still goes back to the boss.
But we don't think men can be raped. It was basically day in and day out on any platform that she used to. So she used to work as a sex worker, and then she tried to transition to a formal job and all of that. And even when she was trying to get a formal job, people on LinkedIn recruiters on LinkedIn would be like either harassing or asking for sex work, etc., etc. I think she was at some point, her phone was buzzing so much that she had to switch it off. Like she was like, I can't actually do this anymore. And she would be surveilled in public. People would like take countenance and show pictures of her, etc. So I felt like there was some kind of like just vitriol, basically, like an open lava situation that she had to go through. And there, again, I think we had a consultation in Bangalore, and I think people were sort of echoing what you were saying, that yes, legal reforms, but like it seems that that's going to be part of the sort of picture. And so, where she ultimately sort of found support was in sort of community-based organizations who were sort of more sensitive to her needs, etc. And would also provide material support. So I think the material aspect of TFGBB gets left out because people are just like, it's a sign, mental health is affected by it, etc. Which it is, and it's very real, and it's extremely isolating. People don't ask for help. Another interesting thing that came up was, even though that was not a threat that anybody said that they experienced, was that people said that they were obviously really fearful of going back to public spaces after like a huge network harassment campaign and a lot of threats, etc. But they were specifically afraid of acid attacks, and that was not something that was like explained by them, that was something that was mentioned. But I think I found that to be a very South Asian phenomenon of like being afraid that will happen to you, and even in the context of dating violence, and even in the context of like large scale harassment campaigns, etc. So there was like a range, and another thing that I found out in terms of forms was that the country is so big and the community is so big that there's just a lot of variation. So what we found in Manipur was very different. For instance, like there are internet bans, there's challenges in collectivization, activists are being surveilled. All of this is happening, which is preventing organizing. So they're finding other ways to organize, etc. But internet bans then do become like a to sort of curb dissent, etc. Then we spoke to a lot of Muslim trans people, and they were basically saying that most of the TFGB that they experience is based on like their religious identity. Another aspect is sort of political speech. If you are out there and you're saying something political that might not bode well with people, that's again like a platform thing where it's broken the system apart, where like it's extremely polarized. But there also people invoke like either Islamophobia, either Kashmiri identity, either your caste in those ways. To the extent where like some participants have now they've tapped into it and they now know what to do about it. So I think one participant was saying that whenever I post something that's political and I see like somebody with a particular strange DP like posting under it, I immediately disable comments. So people are actually actively now, they're living on the internet, they know like what ways there are to keep yourself safe at an individual level. And but I would say that what I learned through the project was that I have no idea how to keep myself safe online. And I think those kinds of collective wisdom of the community, I think, is really important to share with each other. So yeah, I want to take a question. Most people in the community are scared of the police and don't want to be involved, etc. But some people are like in a social location where they're able to navigate those systems better. And some of them might work in the non-profit sector, or some of them might just bring the capital with them as individuals. But to create those links between people who might not otherwise go ahead and report something like that with people who can assist them through the process and help navigate. But basically everybody echoed that only, that like reporting is extremely inefficient and like there's no transparency. You never get to know where in the process a thing is. And I wanted to know like the meta guidelines that have been rolled back on hateful speech, like allowing basically like now we don't have any benchmark and you can say like queer people are meant to do and all this. So how would one go about contesting that? And like for instance, the Trans Act is also something that would apply, etc.
As such, one of the things that I feel, again, the Trans Act, everyone has been talking about it, that it's not a very strong legislation, so to speak. But at the same time, the last month there was a very, very interesting judgment that came, that talk that despite the fact that it's a weak legislation, the Trans Act and the rules are not that strong, there are certain things that have been given within that framework which the union government has still not worked on. So just to give an instance, this case is Jane Kaushik's case, who is a school teacher in Rajasthan who's terminated, whose job is terminated because again she's a trans woman, so the school authorities are making all kinds of excuses as to why they don't. It's not a case pertaining to online like technologically facilitated gender-based violence, but it's just basic plain old discrimination, right? Because of a person's transgender status. However, judgment is important because what it says is that while the legislation, the act and the rules are not that strong, there are certain things within the rules and the act which say that which should have been done by now. So for instance, I think Rule 11, Sub-Rule 2 talks about making an equal opportunity policy. There is one rule that is talking about having, I think this is section 12 if I'm not wrong, within the act itself. It is talking about have someone who is a complaint redressal person, something like that. And within the act and the rules, they have clearly specified, the legislation and the rules clearly specify that you do it within 2 years of coming of the legislation. The rules came in 2020, the act came in 2019. Today is 2025. We don't have equal opportunity policy anywhere in the country, not at the union level, not at the state level, right? States are not making that. We don't have a grievance redressal officer anywhere. So who does one go to? So if someone is getting bullied, even via the internet or whatever, if there is like at a, okay, one can say that, okay, Meta has rolled that back. Meta is allowing for hateful speech to happen on its platform. But supposedly that kind of bullying is happening via people, via like students, in a same university. So if there was a grievance redressal officer who could have looked into that kind of hateful speech against a person, that would have been helpful. But the thing is, the union government is not really interested.
Yeah.
So interestingly, the judgment is important because that they have made like an advisory committee right now, and they have given a time frame that within 3 months you give us like what exactly needs to be done. So let's stay hopeful that the Trans Act would be used for once for good.
Yeah, I think the legal victories are, they basically said we need both these policies for all the students and we need to make it happen. But they had to sue the organization, lost a lot of income, a lot of years. But yeah, it was sort of really important.
Just resonates to what you were saying, like both of you are saying that
Speech and expression, which apparently can go without reasonable restrictions now. And second most important thing was that they have now integrated AI to oversee what content is wrong and what content is not wrong. And earlier there were non-profit organizations and community organizations working as middleman to take in complaints, severe complaints, and then expedite the process with Meta. And we were one of those. So our work entirely went away with them. And the third thing is that when the guidelines came forward, and this is something that my brother told me, is that the same year that the guidelines, I think 23,
These guidelines, the ones that I was talking about.
the ones with sensitive content. It started with sensitive content
And then it went back.
Yeah,
That was
2023, 2024 was also the year where Meta saw the most highest capital that they got from letting people post whatever they want to and what they don't want to. Also, this is for the younger students here to realize the intentions of the lawmakers hand in hand with the intentions of these digital platforms. Digital platforms letting go of these restrictions is one thing. And compounded to that is the lawmakers coming up with new guidelines to use digital platforms to make sure they are the ones who can look into your personal lives with extremely vague laws. We were just speaking to Harun about how the new IT rule that came out in August has something that you can be a subject to legality if you use synthetically generated information that appears to be true. What does that mean? What is appears to be true? How many of you use AI? Everybody. How do you use AI on digital platforms? Do you put captions with AI that are text related or like put photos? everything now comes under this regime which requires you for like a how do I say, a guideline that you need to put a label to let people know that this is synthetically. All of this is an attempt to make you really, really scared about the new laws that are coming up, the new trends and policies, the ways in which look at who's benefiting out of it, look at who's not benefiting out of it, look at how vague these are, look at where is your redressal mechanism if something goes wrong. So these are really things that need to be questioned in this, how do I say, in this regime.
Thanks, everyone. If we have been perfectly fine, Shmita, with any of this, why give other people an opportunity to use your data against you? If you have ownership of your own data, then you don't necessarily have to think about placing the ball in someone else's court and trying to, wonder how we can regulate the actions of another. And it becomes much simpler that way.
Can I answer this? I'll tell one. There were a lot of these strange wrong number calls, and then they would chat them up and then convince them that the parents don't love them, and then ask them to go ahead and marry them, or like, come out, meet me, and bring your friend also, my friend is here, so my friend can meet your friend. There was a lot of phygital movement happening. One of the things that the parents said was the same thing that you're saying. They banned the girls from using internet after 7 p.m. Isn't that the same rule that we have in physical space? Don't go outside after 7 p.m. As if we are understanding that crimes only happen. The idea is that if the platform is creating a space which is not comfortable, fight back. Instead of losing the opportunity, because to be very honest, digital platforms can, sorry to quote the most wrongest example here, wrongest is not even a word, but BTS. It's all digital platform. If you don't have digital platform, you are on a loss of global opportunities, money. The tech is going ahead of you. You will be really, really lost behind. What you have to do is that ask them for what is yours instead of missing out on the opportunity. If I have been harassed in this lane, it's my natural tendency to never take this lane again, and that's wrong. That's my right, right? We all pay taxes. I should be able to walk, and there should be safety appointed by somebody for me.
I want to respond, add to that. So there is this assumption that when you're talking about platforms, that only platforms that we engage with are like for social media apps, which we are doing for pleasure and leisure, right? But like when we are talking about like basic services, just to have a bank account or to get like vaccinated, you need to produce an Aadhaar card, right? Now, where exactly is your data stored? The data is stored, again, there is a public-private partnership that's going on, and all of that data is given to a private company to look at, to browse through, and we don't even know what exactly are they going to do with that data, right? So, with that presumption that, okay, we can stop usage of platforms, but then again, when it comes to basic services that we need from the state, right? What exactly are they, when they're collecting that kind of data to say that, okay, we want demographic details of who are the people who we are looking at. They are asking private companies to be storing that data, and they are the ones who are managing that data, might mine it for God knows what reason. So, putting that expectation on people that, okay, don't use that. We don't know what exactly are they using the data for. And that's what happened. Like, many of you might have gotten vaccinated by paying money, right? We were not technically beneficiaries when you were getting vaccinated during the pandemic. But then again, you needed to, when you were going to a particular facility to get vaccinated, they asked for an Aadhaar card because at that point of time, vaccine was in short supply, right? So they had to keep a track of what is your age demography. Okay, are you someone who has already been given the first dosage and all of that? We did not have a health card at that point of time, but by using the Aadhaar card as a measure to track who are the people who are getting vaccinated, in fact, the country created a health repository, like the COVID app and everything. Like, you have to understand, like when we're talking about platforms, it's like the state and the private parties coming together and saying that, okay, we own it, you don't own it.